Hello, my name is Justin Bright, and welcome to Kerbal Space Program version 1.8.1 in my next small step RP-1 career mode playthrough. And we are just finished with our docking between our Gemini spacecraft and the Agena Target Vehicle for the very first time that we have managed that. The first time we launched an Agena Target Vehicle, we kind of screwed up because my training was not ready. So I wound up having to revert that, or not revert that, I just kind of dropped it into orbit and left it, and that was not super useful. But this one has worked so far, and I have gone kind of painstakingly slow through the process, so I don't know, maybe that's entertaining for you guys, hopefully it is. But yeah, did kind of a manual docking, which is the most manual docking I think I've ever done, so very cool stuff. But now we are ready to move on with our mission. All right, contract complete, crew duration of 2 days. Fantastic. And I think that also should mean that we have finished the first part of our orbit. So now we just need to change our orbit to an orbit with a perigee above 150 kilometers and an apogee of between 550 and 750 kilometers. So that is going to require us to be a little tricky. Planning on just shutting down, shut down. I should probably hotkey this for future missions, but we are going to shut down all of these thrusters, and I'm also going to shut down the secondary propulsion thrusters, because what I want to use for this is the Agena engine to make this change to our orbit. I'm going to control from here, which is going to flip us around, and there we go. So now we should be able to point this way through the center of mass and fire up the main engine on the Agena, which has 1400 meters per second of delta V, which is much better than anything else that we have right now. So we should be able to change our orbit. And like I said, we want to get to a 400 by 150, or no, a 600 by 150 kilometer orbit. So the easiest way to change that actually is probably to do that from like over here, about halfway through there. So it looks a little bit like this, but that's obviously not quite right. So we want 155 by 391. So what we need to do is we need to just kind of adjust from there. It's this one, not that one. All right, by burning radial, we're able to change our orbit the way that we need to. And it looks like this is actually going to do. We're just going to burn 290 meters per second of delta V radial at this point, which is going to give us a 155 by 657 kilometer orbit, which is going to be just fine. That should allow us to use our deorbiting solid rocket motors to, deorbit, and then that will get us. That will be able to get us home. So that should do it. Let's go ahead. Yep, delete that node, and let's make this happen. All right, so engine is fired up, and we are changing our orbit and doing the mission of Gemini 11 with Pete Conrad and Richard Gordon, which was the actual Gemini 11 was the first orbit rendezvous with an Agena Target Vehicle, which we did not quite manage to do, although we tried to do something very similar to it. But yeah, it had a very similar mission profile to what we have done here, They tried to get direct. They basically launched one after the other on two pads on the same day, attempted to rendezvous right away, and then used the Agena to push to a world record high apogee Earth orbit, which I'm actually hoping now that there's no what do you call it? That the radiation belt. We're not going to be too far into the radiation belt. Push 0. I think we're okay. I can never read this. I have no idea. Yeah, because it's actually a bunch of toroids that are like inside each other. So I'm hoping that we're not going to be so far out that we are going to be experiencing a large amount of radiation. If so, that is going to be a lesson in and of itself, I suppose. But yeah, we are linked up still with the, we're linked up. We have 8 days of food, 100 days of electric charge because of the fuel cell that is burning. But also from the the power-hungry near-Earth avionics in here that is stealing a whole bunch of electricity. Let's see, what else? Geo and MMH, so we don't have any transferable fuel. Yeah, I don't think there's anything else that we need the Agena Target Vehicle for. We should be able to deorbit just fine without it, so we are going to say farewell. We are not going to do that thing where they had a stuck thruster on one of the Gemini missions and spin around like mad people. I think we are going to probably not do that. Rigidize the docking port. I guess that probably would have been a good thing to do before we started the burn, but you know, whatever. Yeah, so that's that. That is kind of how this is going to work, and how I would like to use a transtage of some sort to get Gemini around the moon is in exactly this way, and this has worked fantastic so far, other than all the fiddliness of rendezvous. So we're undocking from the Gemini, and the Gemini is going to just push away and reactivate its thrusters in case I need them. Very good. And now track the indexing key. All of that is all good to go. Fantastic. So this we can activate the side thruster engines. I am going to point orbital retrograde. And there's no more ignitions on our Agena upper stage, so that is not actually a useful thing, but I can use the side of the small thrusters to attempt to deorbit, which may or may not work, but hopefully it does, and then we won't have to worry about it anymore. All right, firing up those engines, and we are off, and we can watch it slowly burning, slowly burning away. Okay, so yeah, there we go. Let's go ahead and do that thing where we point our butt at the sun so we can look down at planet Earth and also not boil off our hydrogen. So we are in a good spot. 4 days to go, and let's just warp our way there. All right, just another hour to go before our contract is considered complete. There we go. So now it is time for us to return home safely, which is always the most important part of a manned mission. All right, yeah, so now it's time for us to set our trajectory towards home. It looks like I was correct about the radiation not being an issue here. Valerie Dunn is a little bit stressed, but Vicky Chambers is fine. Like, she's just like, this is where I belong, to be perfectly honest. A scientist able to do her missions up in space, I mean, I really can't blame her. So yeah, there we go. That is that mission. Now it is time for us to get home. I just want to see real quick. We are pretty close to our apogee, but I want, like, if I go right here and burn the thrusters at -7.9, what is that going to get us as far as our re-entry? Yeah, that'll have us re-enter over here. So let's bring that around. See, there's only so many places that we can make this burn safely. Safest of all is probably this maneuver here, where it brings our Earth perigee down to about, yeah, we'll say 78 kilometers. That seems like a safe place to try to put down. So let's go ahead and plan for that. We will point ourselves at the node and begin our operations to bring our astronauts home. All right, so that node is in about 30 seconds, so it's time for us to say farewell to our upper stage. So I can just out everything that we need so that we make sure that I have all the oxygen and everything else for our trip home. And there we go. So that's all packed in. I don't need to transfer the wastewater. Actually, let's put the wastewater into the into the equipment section that I am now about to jettison. There we go. And we are now ready. We are pointing orbital retrograde. And fire up the deorbiting thrusters. You can see is bringing our apogee down quite a bit, but also bringing down our perigee, which is the more important part. Bringing it down inside Earth's atmosphere, hopefully at a safe altitude that will not cause us to burn up, but will also make sure that we capture on one pass. That got us down a lot further than I expected, but I think that should be okay because we have the option now of a lifting re-entry. So we can now dump the retrograde section. Just decouple that. And we have just a little bit of NTO and MMH in our re-entry control system. I probably should have moved some fuel up towards that, but that's probably going to be fine. So now we are expecting to re-enter in just a couple of minutes. All right, so one of the important parts is making sure that we are oriented in the correct direction because we are going to be using the descent mode on the Gemini capsule, which is going to shift the center of mass. Yeah, so we can turn the descent mode on, which is going to shift the center of mass and is going to make it so that the we have a little bit of a lifting re-entry, which will be very, very good because we are pushing down pretty deep into Earth's atmosphere. All right, I only have a little bit of RCS fuel left, so I really hope that this thing becomes dynamically stable as I'm descending. We are getting into the thicker part of the atmosphere. The Gemini heat shield is lunar rated, so this actually should be just fine for that, so long as the craft doesn't flip out. Okay, we are officially out of fuel. So hopefully this doesn't flip out too much. Whoa. Pushes it way up. And I'm a little bit nervous to do that because I don't have the fuel to hold orientation. I'm really worried about it flipping. All right, we're in it now. Yeah, I'm really afraid to turn that on because of how much I was deflecting. I'm really worried that I wasn't going to be able to return to that because I didn't give myself enough RCS fuel. So I'm just going to kind of bank on this heat shield doing the work for me. All right, the terrors of re-entry, the flames going by. Seems like our astronauts are just fine, grimly accepting the risks and the dangers of atmospheric re-entry after doing a week's worth of work for the first time that anyone has ever been up in space for that long. Right, we are at 60 kilometers. Our speed is dropping. We are getting up over 3 Gs. Rotating slightly, which would actually make it very, very dangerous for us to turn on descent mode now because we are not able to hold our roll orientation. There's pieces of our spacecraft flying past at high velocity. The ablator is not even being used at all, which is fascinating. I wonder if I installed something wrong there. Or if it's just that amazing, like it's just not, it's, because it's lunar rated, is it just not hot enough to even ablate at all? Or did I do something wrong? That is the constant worry in RP-1, because I'm never sure if I've broken something or if something is intended or if something is not working as intended. But it looks like we are doing okay. Our speed is dropping down. We are getting up to 8 Gs. Yeah, we are just about at 8 Gs, which is really quite a lot. That is a hefty load. They are pressed into their seats. The thruster fuel being out, we are unable to control the slight roll we have, but we are getting now through the worst part of re-entry, and our G-forces are decreasing as we are safely down inside the atmosphere. If you can consider 2 kilometers per second of velocity safe at any place. But yeah, I think we are going to be just fine. If I turn on descent mode, yeah, it kind of flips us up. Okay, it doesn't flip all the way around, so that's fine. But this would have given us a better lifting re-entry if I had been bold enough to use it, but I didn't have enough RCS fuel to maintain that trajectory, or to not flip out if something had gone wrong. And I really didn't want to risk the pilots, and I think that this was the right risk to take. So we are looking good there. So let's go ahead and arm the drogue parachute, which is going to deploy shortly, or in a moment or two, as we descend down through the atmosphere and wobble wildly like one of those Mercury missions that I mentioned previously. All right, the drogue has deployed. Drogue indeed has deployed, and we are in the pre-deployment altitude, dropping down at 116 meters per second. The drogue has inflated, slowing us down dramatically and preparing us to for the main parachute, which I have decoupled the drogue and armed the main, which will be ready to save us as we plummet towards the water, plummet towards the ocean. Any minute now with the main parachute. There we go. Okay. Yeah, so the main parachute has deployed, and that decouples all the stuff that was on top of it and leaves us with the main parachute reefing out and expanding. Single parachute slowing us down to a very gentle car crash worth of velocity. All right, just cranking up the ambient light just a little bit so we can see at least the spacecraft as we slowly descend. Although we could just look from within the I wonder what that is. As we look down within the was that target always there? Now I'm like questioning my sanity. But adjusting the light so that we can see the parachute high above us as we are about to splash down in the water. 40 meters, 30, 20, 10, splashdown. We have arrived safely back on Earth into the ocean, which is wobbling us in a very choppy sea indeed, but oh dear. Just rocking out, dancing for joy. There we go. And even as we speak, the recovery crew is on their way to rescue our first docking astronauts, Valerie Dunn and Vicky Chambers. All right, so Valerie Dunn got an extra 183 days on her retirement date, and Vicky Chambers absolutely adored everything that happened up there and is going to be with us for 731 more days. Just fantastic. No bonus science or anything except for what we got from orbit. Recovered our Gemini capsule, and Vicky Chambers has advanced to level 1. Contract complete, orbital flight maneuvers with 2+ crew, which gets us a little bit more money, and that brings us up to 1.3 million funds. Fantastic. So we've got our we have our research and development underway, so that is good. We are going to need to update this. So what we need to do now is we actually I'm finding that we are going to need a new launch pad. So let's go ahead and get that 700-ton launch pad rolling so that I am no longer constrained by the 350-ton limit, because the vehicle that I used for the Pioneer Venus could be improved even more with if I had the extra weight because as I mentioned, it was about 364 tons if I use the LR87H2s. So let's just plan to do that and launch it on a bigger pad, like no big deal. And this gives us a lot more options that we should definitely take advantage of. So the Gemini 2 is going to be done in 75 days. And our first EVA is going to fail in 30 days. So that's not great. So we're definitely going to fail that. And then I'm going to lose all of my money and a whole bunch of my reputation. I don't think there's anything I can do to speed this up, I'll be honest. Let's see. Because the Gemini is going to take 75 days. Even if I were to rush build this a couple more times, that would bring it down to about half. So that's 40 days probably. Shoot, that is really annoying that I failed that. Just because it didn't come standard with nitrogen and I forgot to put nitrogen on board. That's my fault. I should have thought about that. I forgot that EVA required its own thrust that you had to pack on board the spacecraft, not on the individual astronauts. So, well, at least that means that this is going to just break even. So we're going to fail this contract and then I can accept it again. And then that will give me back the money, hopefully, when I succeed the second time. That will give me back the money that we need to actually continue our space program and not completely fail out. But that's super frustrating, but, you know, is what it is. So we'll just deal with that. But we can also look forward to another orbital contract, probably. Yep, no reason not to do another one of these, and this one will be another 7-day mission. Although I'm not sure how I would get into this orbit without an Agena without an Agena target vehicle to dock with and move us in orbit. So I may have to make this another twofer. All right, so let's take a look at building us a lunar sample return vehicle, because I've been putting that contract off for quite a long time. So I have here a piece that I'm not sure if I'm ashamed to admit or proud to admit that this took me hours and hours to come up with. Mostly, and also a lot of feedback from the good folks on the RP-0 Discord, who helped me out immensely in figuring out where the heck my problem was. So, backing up, I've had a lot of trouble with re-entering vehicles. And the issue has often not been that my heat shield has burned up, but that the thing that was attached to it does. What I've discovered is that avionics and other procedural parts appear to have a very low thermal mass on their skin, such that they would explode as soon as, from conduction, as soon as the heat shield experienced any amount of heat, basically. And I spent a really long time testing and trying again and testing and trying again and trying different trajectories and trying to figure out what the heck could possibly be wrong, and then asking on the Discord and finally I discovered that the solution was to put the probe on top of a parachute, because the parachute has much better thermal mass than the avionics does, and the parachute will turn red for a moment and maybe a heat bar will appear in the exact same re-entry profile, but it'll be fine. So it's fine. This is fine. So that's what I have worked out and discovered there. It's because the heating is very complicated and arcane, even if it is made a lot more realistic with all of the real solar system mods and so forth. So it's just something that we need to know, that putting your avionics directly on a heat shield and then dropping that from 400 million meters is probably a bad idea. It makes perfect sense to me. So that's what I have here. So incredibly basic, just a heat shield, 0.625 meters with a parachute and an avionics that I'm going to be using as a as my sample return canister, basically. This is based loosely on the design that I had for the Pioneer Venus 2 mission. However, it was very, very big. Like that one was huge, and I don't think it needs to be as big as it was, because this is 3 kilograms, and it's going to be bigger by, like, I don't know, I think 800 grams. I think that's how much the sample, this soil sample size is. Let's open this up. Yeah, it says 80 grams is how much the surface sample mass is. So we should have, this will be bigger by about 80 grams, but that's it. So fine, easy peasy. Then I would use the center of mass Y offset to put it down at the bottom of the thing. A little too low, perhaps. Yeah, that was a little too low. Just to put it at the bottom of this, because I don't want to do something like, because you can cheat with this like a lot. Like you can, if you look at my center of mass, you can use the offset tool to put the center of mass wherever the heck you want. I'm not sure how much that matters when it's, yeah, it does matter quite a bit actually. So yeah, you can cheat pretty vigorously with this, but we're not going to do that. I just want to put it at center the mass at the bottom of the part instead of roughly at the center. And that gives us a nice low center of mass on this return capsule. So it's going to just kind of surf in on this lunar rated heat shield, and I'm just going to drop it into the atmosphere unguided, and that should be totally fine. It has a little parachute that I need to make sure that I fix, because this is different than the parachutes that I've been using, so I just need to make sure that I'm doing them correctly. So we have main chute 6.1, 1505, chute 6.1, 1500, 500. We have the material is going to be just silk, because we really don't need it to be much of anything. Change material, silk. There we go. It, like the main chute and the secondary chute, it's not like they launch one at a time. I'm pretty sure it's like this is the main chute and this is the secondary chute, I think. At least that's what it seemed like when I tested this, and I had one of these to 1500, 500, and one to 5000, 1000. Like one just deployed a lot, or the left side deployed a lot earlier than the right side. So, okay, so apply those settings. That reduces the part cost to 1.6, makes it a nice little 4 kilogram parachute, and that is that. And then we have our lunar rated heat shield, which I've taken out the vast majority of the ablator, because once I'm not having to worry about the avionics popping from thermal conduction, I find that the ablator works just fine. Just a tiny amount of ablator coming down from the moon is all you really need for something like this. So that's what we're working with to begin with. So that means we're starting with 0.014, like that's what, 14 kilograms? Yeah, we're working with 14 kilograms instead of like 115, which is about how big the Pioneer Venus lander is. So yeah, that would be why we're doing it like this, just shaving off as much weight as we possibly can for something that doesn't need to be all that heavy. So next we need to, because we are just having this little tiny science core, we need to actually have a return kind of service module thing that is going to, working backwards in our goals here, that is going to get us from the surface of the moon. So I think our best bet here is going to be something with integral, something high pressure integral, and then probably a kerosene thruster. Okay, so we got our delta V stats, and we need about 3,000 to 3,200 meters per second of delta V to return, based on my calculations. We need something like 2,000 meters per second to get up off of the surface into a low orbit of the moon, and then I needed about another 1,000 or so to get back on a trajectory that would take me to Earth. At least that was in the testing that I've done. That's what I got, and I kind of justify doing that by, you know, saying that there's math. Math exists, and these are all based on mathematical formulas. It's just a matter of me testing to see how those actually apply and trying to do it in that practical, tactile way rather than actually doing the math on paper myself. All right, so something vaguely roughly like this will work for our ascent stage, and that gets us to 672 kilograms. So that's getting pretty hefty. So now what we need is to add a a descent stage, which I'm not sure I'm going to have with the entire 2400 meters per second. I think I'm going to use a braking stage as well, or maybe we could even just use the Centaur that we're sending this thing up on. All right, so let's zip right along and do some fast forwarding through this build process. But this is kind of a very not old, but it's a design pattern that I use fairly frequently when I'm building landers, where I will try to put the entire landing structure and all of the things that I might need out of it onto these little capsules that are stuck off the side. And right now I'm determining that I don't actually like the the Surveyor landing engines. They're just not good. They have a failure rate, and they do throttle, but they have very low thrust, and they're not as efficient as the generic thrusters, so I wind up using just generic thrusters, and you can just flutter the throttle on that, like turn it on and off really quickly to get a small amount of thrust. So maybe that's a little cheesy, but it's just so much better to do it that way. But yeah, so common design pattern is stapling on these capsules on the side and then working on from there. And now I want to start getting on the science experiments. So the key one, of course, is the ground sampler. And I'm determining now if it's possible to actually have it make contact with the ground. I'm not sure that that's actually important, but I think I would rather not take that chance, and also it looks better that way. So we have lots of different science experiments, and after having determined that some of them have like dual purpose, like some of them it sounds like they actually include the old experiments on them. So I've been trying to actually include the real parts rather than just sticking everything into the procedural probe core. The other trick is I want to make sure that we have enough room on, not enough room, but we have balance on our craft. So I'm definitely trying not to balance it using fuel tanks. So I'm trying to arrange the science experiments just so that I can get a good balance on the craft. Adding a couple experiments now into the probe core, the ones that I couldn't fit one way or the other on the side. Basically, I don't want two magnetometer booms, and that's the only one. And then it's time to start thinking about how I get RCS added onto this thing. Just kind of putting a little quad up here at the top, I think, toying with the idea of just using 3, but I'm not 100% sure that's going to give me the balanced thrust that we're going to need, because this is going to be, there's going to be at least one moment that is incredibly critical that I have a very precise amount of thrust that is keeping me oriented at my surface retrograde before I smash into the ground. Yeah, so that is that, and I've got these on here, and I'm kind of moving things around as I'm dealing with the height of the legs, which seem to be fixed, by the way. One of the updates that I did must have fixed it. I didn't notice it until now, so I'm pretty excited to see how these work in practice. But it's good to not have to be landing on like just a bare probe core, just a bare engine bell or whatever. All right, spent a little bit playing with the textures and the colors on this thing to give it kind of an interesting look, and that's about when I realized that if I want the craft to be balanced but also minimize the weight that we are trying to ascend with, then I need to put the experiments on the actual landing stuff, because what I'm finding is that we've reduced the delta V on our ascent vehicle pretty dramatically. Like, I started this whole process with about 3,300 meters per second of delta V on the ascent stage, which is what I think that I'm going to need based on my testing. But once I put all these experiments on there, it has dramatically reduced my my total delta V, gave me about like 2,700-ish, and it's not 100% certain that it's going to still be, that I'm still going to be able to make that work. But I want to try to reduce that as much as possible, reduce the weight that we're carrying back, because we're not going to need to do any experiments in between the lunar surface and Earth re-entry. You know what I mean? Like, that's all going to be done at that point. So yeah, there we go. And now I'm just working on kind of balancing that and trying to adjust the staging so that I can see if I've fixed my delta V problem. And I don't think I have. So I had to extend the stage a little bit more, and that is how the creep of extra weight keeps happening, because I've also realized that I did not have any solar panels on here. Alright, so solar panels settled. Now it's time to work on getting our antennas put together. So I want to have a really good Communitron 16 antenna, the extendable kind. We're going to make that S-band, level 4, all that sort of thing, so that we get really good communication back to Earth from the lunar surface. But then we also want a little... I'm now setting up a Tech Level 1 internal antenna that I'm going to use to just communicate to ground stations while I'm in low Earth orbit on the way there and back. So that should give us good signal in both directions in both cases. So now it's just a matter of making sure that my electric charge will work, and I'm doing a whole lot of testing on how much power draw all of my experiments will take. So what I'm trying to balance here, and it's really hard to say, is like, which ones am I going to be doing on the surface? Which ones am I going to be doing for a long period of time? So which ones do I have to actually worry about their power draw? And the answer is most of them, except for like the surface sample, and I think there was like one other one, I can't remember which one off the top of my head, that had a very short time duration, so you didn't have to worry about that. But all in all, that wound up being too much power, so I wound up having to redo the solar panels several times, trying to figure out what the heck was going to work out as far as powering all this stuff on the surface, because it's such a tough thing, because if you put in a really big battery, that is one way to deal with it, but that can be very massive and expensive, and that would be a big mass penalty. So you got to balance the cost and mass of a battery with solar panels, and as solar panel technology gets better and better, it becomes a better bargain, but it's still very hard to say which one will actually work out better for you. So in this case, I think I found that the static panels, as opposed to the what do you call it, the procedural ones, worked out a lot better for what I was trying to do. I was able to get a lot more power for less weight and cost with these panels, so we'll see how that works. But yeah, there's just a lot of fussing around with this. All right, so I think that's everything as far as the lander itself. I'm sure this is not the best possible way to build something like this, but this is how I will do it, and we will see if this will work, because the next step is to see about breaking into our landing, because I don't see any reason not to do just a standard direct descent. So let's just see what this would look like on a lunar trajectory. So this is my Tela Centaur rocket. It does not have enough to do what I need it to do. But let's try it with the Paladin one, the king of the 350-ton pad. All right, so a couple of modifications to the Paladin 1 launcher. I have extended the payload fairing for the interstage here that shrouds the Centaur, because I have put 50 MLI layers on the Centaur, and you cannot have that out in the airstream. It will burn up and explode. Because I'm hoping to use this Centaur as the braking stage as well, which is why I've also upgraded this avionics that is powering this whole spacecraft. Okay, so I'm comparing costs here. So we have here a 350-ton deep space avionic that has the functionality of, or that can run this whole rocket, basically, with 350 tons of control. That's going to cost me $22.90 when all is said and done, and cost a bunch of tooling costs. Or I could spend about $20,000 in tooling costs to have them separate with a larger near-Earth avionics, that's going to be a little bit... Let's see, this would be 718 kilograms, this is 580, this is 275, so it would weigh more, and it would cost more to do this. But it would weigh less in this stage, I suppose, by a slight amount. By actually a fairly significant amount. That would save about 500 kilograms on this upper stage, which is a good thing, and that is kind of why you would separate out those avionics, but I'm just not sure that mass savings is actually worth what we need to do here. Well, maybe it is. I'm just looking at how much delta V I'm saving just by taking off this 275 kilograms here. Yeah, so let's do that. Let's save ourselves some mass. I want this to be a 20-ton module. Deep space. And then we're going to put an avionics ring at the top of our LR87H2 stage with 330 tons of near-Earth avionics. There, so that'll cost roughly the same in the end as the single module, but it will weigh less on this stage, which I think will get us more delta V, which, you know, is the name of the whole game here. Yeah, that should make it so that we have a very comfortable buffer indeed when we get to the moon. Okay, so there we go. That is basically my design for a lunar return vehicle. I have no idea if this is going to work, so now I am going to do some testing, but that is something that I'm not going to just kind of walk through. I will leave you all in suspense for when we launch this for real. Alrighty, so I have moved time forward just a little bit. Ooh, that's weird. I don't know why that's doing that. Anyways, I moved time forward just a little bit so that I could basically get the next batch of rocketry finished. So I pushed time forward to finish out the node for 1965 orbital rocketry while we were building our next Gemini mission. So it's not like I was holding back any missions or anything. It's just there was a little bit of time in between because I haven't been rushing as hard as I have been. But that got me all the way up to 1965 orbital rocketry, and I haven't really done a redesign of my launch vehicle since 1962. So it's been a little while. I've been adding things because I haven't done anything with the LR-79, the Delta engine. The E1 came along, and I decided that wasn't actually worth my time. I picked up the AJ-10 Advanced, which was used on the Titan Tran stage, the upper stage for the Titan 3, I think. Some new H1 configs, LR87 configs, LR91 configs, and then this node 1965, which has just like one of everything upgrading. So yeah, amongst this is basically one of everything that we use, and then some other things. So I spent a little bit of time kind of reconfiguring my rockets, making sure everything was up to date. So I wanted to get to that in between recordings, basically, because I knew that was going to take quite a long time to play around with. So we've done that, and we have a couple missions upcoming. We have our Gemini 3 mission that is going to be coming up shortly, and the Agena Target Vehicle is right behind for that. The Lunar Returner that I did that little design mini design bit about is coming up, and then we have the RP-1, which is going to be a ScanSat satellite using apparently deprecated parts. So kind of looking in on our missions, we have first EVA, so that's good. We're going to definitely be doing that. I've remembered to put nitrogen on the Gemini capsule this time. Orbital flight with maneuvers and 2+ crew. We'll be doing that one. That's a nice easy one. I'm happy about that. Venus landing and Venus orbital probe is on the way, hopefully. Fingers crossed. All right, so we're going to pick up for the mission that we have lined up for the Lunar Returner. We're going to want to pick up Lunar Landing Uncrewed, the 4th one of these that we've done, and the Lunar Landing and Sample Return we should finally be able to do, which should get us a good amount of money, and I don't know if this one's repeatable or not, but it would still be very nice to be able to get this one done, because this should, hopefully, with all the new experiments, get us a ton of science. So we'll do that, and that actually maxes us out on contracts. I had some plans to take some more speculative ones because, for example, Crude Lunar Flyby gives us 4 years to complete it after you accept the contract. So I could absolutely get this now and have a trans stage of some sort ready to go to fly this mission within 4 years. Like, that is not an issue, and I should have taken this a long time ago. But, you know, is what it is. Like, these little meta things are... they're the things that I am least knowledgeable about. Like, it's obvious when you actually look at it and think about the timelines and that sort of thing, but I've just been like, I've been barely keeping ahead, man. I've been trying to do those interplanetary missions, and that's been kind of my focus for a little while. But now that we are thinking about manned spaceflight again, and we are on the track towards Gemini, this is very high on our list. So as soon as we get like the mission control ready to go, I want to accept this so we can get that money and then invest it back into our program. I'm really glad that we got the contracts that we did. The advances brought us back up to $500,000 funds, which is great because we have lots of tooling and stuff to do for pretty much every spacecraft we're going to be launching, because I'm upgrading to the new avionics and all that sort of stuff. Well, not the ones that we're currently launching, but everything after these items are going to have to be probably retooled at least to some degree, because I went through and I basically redid every single one of my launch vehicles. All right, here we have on the pad another Gemini Target Vehicle using the last of the old style Agena D engines, which is terribly suited for the purpose for which we are using it, because it only has 2 ignitions. I discovered that... Hold on, 3, 2, 1, ignition. Okay, liftoff. I discovered that the actual production line Agena that was used for the Gemini Target Vehicle and the next upgrade that this thing has 15 ignitions. Ah! And I've been like really fighting hard to be able to use just this one with 2. Well, it's just something to very much look forward to, and look forward to it indeed we will. So one of the other things is that this is the last of the my Tela rockets that is going to be using the H1 engines, because with the upgrade we got new LR-89s, which are just lovely, and I actually like the way they perform better yet than the H1s. So I'll be switching to that when we get to the new one, so I guess I could talk about that more when we get to it. But yeah, so otherwise this should be a very similar flight to the previous one. I haven't done any upgrades to this particular mission, not this or the Gemini, except for selecting new science. So let's get into orbit. Don't mind the time skip there. I just realized that I had the booster pitch rate set to my test article with the new Tela rocket that has a much higher thrust to weight ratio on the pad, and therefore it blew itself to tiny pieces, which I think is nonsense. So we are going to just try that one more time. All right, and ignition on our Agena upper stage engine, the last of the Agena Ds that we will be using. So yes, this is pretty standard stuff. This orbit is shorter in duration, or the mission is shorter in duration, but the orbital parameters are a lot higher. So I'm going to have to be a little bit careful about how I do that, especially because the Gemini itself is not at all capable. So we're going to have to be very precise about where the Titan drops it off in orbit before we release and begin chasing our Agena Target Vehicle. So just another 3, 2, 1, and we are finished with our orbit and ready to commence our orbital operations with the Gemini spacecraft. But that's going to have to take place on the next episode. We are just out of time. So yeah, we did a lot of good design work this time. I'm really looking forward to seeing how that lunar returner craft works. Finally getting sample return back from the moon, which is going to allow us to kind of do one of the big missing things from our space program. But yeah, let me know what you guys thought of this design-heavy episode down in the comments below. Give me a like and subscribe, and I will see you next time.